We're gathered here today in the economic, well, what should be, the economic heart of our nation, the city of Johannesburg, a city that was once synonymous with growth, a city that was known as the city of gold, a place of opportunity, ambition, prosperity, and of course, innovation. But today, Johannesburg stands as a very symbol of the crossroads that South Africa as a country faces. Buildings are crumbling, the roads are decaying, our taps are running dry, and the people of Johannesburg and South Africa are suffering. As residents of the city, as many of you no doubt are, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And why is this the case? It is the case because of years of economic mismanagement, corruption, outdated, outmoded policies that have enriched a small few and excluded the many. And yet out of this decay must rise a new path, not only one for Johannesburg, but one for South Africa. A path that restores growth, delivers jobs, and gives every single South African a fair shot at succeeding. And that is why we are here today. We are here today to launch our plan to turbocharge the South African economy. What we need to focus on doing is removing the roadblocks to growth and building a new superhighway towards growth and prosperity. So let me begin with a story of shattered dreams. Because every single day, people approach myself and members of the Democratic Alliance with stories about how they have been cut out of the economy. On a growing daily basis, myself and the DA and public representatives receive growing urgent appeals of the desperation that many South Africans are feeling. The fact that they do not have a job. The fact that they cannot put food on the table for their families. A daily appeal on WhatsApps for money, just a little bit of money, to be able to help them get to a point, to be able to go and buy food for their families. And this has accelerated dramatically over the last year. And it is heartbreaking as a public representative to receive these requests for money, which we know we would not be able to meet every single one of them. And to understand the desperation that far too many of our citizens find themselves in, unable to be able to look their own children in the eye around the dinner table because there's so little food to provide for them. And I want to talk today about a story about somebody, and for the purpose of this morning, I will refer to him as Kabelo from Forstloos. Kabelo started a small logistics company with 2 trucks, huge ambition, and an exciting dream. And he truly believed that hard work and dedication from himself would be enough to succeed. But the system has continuously worked against him. He doesn't get funding because he doesn't have assets or collateral. He doesn't get tenders because he is not one of the lucky few in the country to be politically connected. And he doesn't have support because BBBEE in practice has become a massive hurdle rather than a help, as businesses are forced to comply with the onerous and costly criteria if they're to have full access to the opportunities. And in many cases, achieving those criteria are just simply beyond the available cash flow of small and medium and micro enterprises, making it so much harder for them to prosper, while larger, connected organizations and operations continue to rake in the rich rewards that come with political proximity and advantage. The perverse incentive of BBBEE has become that large companies now can cut out all SMEs to inflate their own BE credentials. And sadly, this isn't just Kabelo's story. It is increasingly the story of millions of South Africans who are locked out of a system that rewards the connected and punishes the rest of us. Because here is the hard truth. South Africa's economy is in the ICU. Over the last 15 years, our GDP per capita has shrunk by 10%. Unemployment has climbed from 22% to nearly 33%. And you add discouraged job seekers into that mix, and it's well over the 43% mark. And while this country is bleeding, and while our people are suffering, the government wants to now spend hundreds of millions of rands on a national dialogue, a talk shop with no action, no reform, no plan, and now, by the looks of things, even more dwindling support, with the announcements of further major foundations withdrawing from it. As you know, the Democratic Alliance announced our withdrawal from the national dialogue weeks ago. It is an illegitimate initiative that frankly now lacks all credibility. And even former President Mbeki, who at the time was incredibly critical of our withdrawal from the GNU, which he expressed in an open letter, has now come to exactly the same conclusion that we came to, that this is an insider stitch-up designed so that the ANC can revive its electoral fortunes rather than a genuine discussion and action plan about the way forward. But the reality as well is that our citizens are sick to their back teeth with plans, with talk shops, with symposiums, with colloquia, endlessly diagnosing the problems in South Africa, pushing us further and further into the quagmire of analysis paralysis. We know what the problems are in South Africa. The problems are an economy that's not growing. The problems are unemployment. The problems are inequality, both spatial and economic, that still exists in our country. And the problem is too much talk and not enough action. From the RDP to the NGP to the NDP to now the National Dialogue, we have to endlessly thrash over these problems over and over again. But what we actually need now is decisive action to implement with volition and with vigor to be able to get the economy moving. And so we unveil our plan today to turbocharge the economy. And the first order of business in this plan is to target three major roadblocks that we see which are holding our economy back and preventing economic growth, inward investment, and the ability of entrepreneurs and others to succeed in a country like South Africa. These three roadblocks are BBBEE, employment equity, and the Expropriation Act. BBBEE and the racial quotas that go along with it have failed. Over the last decade, black unemployment has grown, and black household income has fallen dramatically. These policies have failed, and together with expropriation without compensation, creates an environment that deters investment, that hobbles growth and job creation, and ensures that the majority of South Africans remain locked out of opportunity in this country. And this is the problem which people like Kabelo and millions like him face on a daily basis. And it is the reason why investors are steering clear of South Africa. These policies don't just simply fail, they cause significant harm to the people who actually need our help the most. People like Kabelo, who need a government that's working with them, not one that is constantly working against them. And so, it is essential now that these policies go. As South Africa stands at this important national crossroads and a time for action to be able to move forward in the right direction, it is essential that they do. Let me be very clear. Let me be very clear. The DA is not against transformation. We are not against redressing imbalances of the past. And the DA completely acknowledges the deep structural and economic inequality that still exists in our country as legacies of the failed policies of the past. But these are being compounded by a continuation down the road with the failed policies of the present. And so, the only way that we can truly transform South Africa and ensure greater involvement in the economy through fair, clear alternatives that lift people out of poverty and get them onto the mobility ladder are contained in our document. We need to free up our economy so that those entrepreneurs are able to get on with the business of growing their business. And we understand that when their businesses grow, millions of jobs will be created along with them. The only empowerment South Africa genuinely needs is more jobs, because nothing brings dignity like a job. Nothing stops violence like a job. Nothing destroys social ills more than a job. And with more jobs and a growing economy, many of these problems will be solved. Red tape needs to be dramatically slashed and SMMEs freed from the suffocating bureaucracy and crushing labour laws. And while many ANC ministers sit on their hands, DA ministers, many of whom are here today, have started implementing much-needed reforms in their departments. They're all here today, and they are free to speak with all of you about what they're doing, if that is what is required. Secondly, no economy can grow without access to cheap, reliable electricity. And we need to fix this energy crisis in South Africa once and for all by breaking Eskom's monopoly of electricity generation, by creating a truly competitive energy market. We need to introduce rapidly competition into generation and distribution. And we need to make sure that at a municipal level, we are ring-fencing electricity revenue that municipalities are bringing in to reinvest in crumbling infrastructure. For far too long, many local governments have used electricity revenue to subsidize, to fill the leaks in other parts of the creaking municipal structure, instead of actually reinvesting it into these networks. And that is why, despite the fact that companies and people pay their bills on time, are up to date with their municipal accounts, but still sit in darkness because municipalities are not investing in infrastructure and in other instances are not paying their bill to Eskom. We don't need bailouts. We don't need blackouts in South Africa. The third thing is to repair and modernize rail, ports, and digital infrastructure. The reality is, as we sit here today, our ports are ranked amongst the worst in the world. Far behind peer countries in Africa, far behind peer countries in other emerging economies, and far, far behind some of the more developed ports in the world. And that is why we cannot emphasize enough how important it is that we move with speed to concession, freight rail, and port terminals, and end Transnet's stranglehold. We've seen already this morning concerns being expressed about Transnet's ability to be able to continue doing what it's doing. Lack of confidence in its financial situation. The reality is, and we've seen it very clearly during the course of the budget debates in Parliament, that government doesn't have the money required to inject as infrastructure into our ports and into our rail networks. The only way we're going to get them up and running, fit for purpose, and fueling a growing economy is through private-public partnerships, is through concessioning. And this is not something that hasn't been tried before. This is not uncharted territory that we would be moving into. Our peer countries on the continent have done it very successfully. And that is why our ports are being bypassed and ports in other neighboring countries are being favored by shipping lines. The fourth thing we need to do is to ensure that we reform public spending with a bias towards growth. Bailouts to state-owned entities have cost 310 billion rand, and enough is enough. Government now needs to stabilize debt, cut waste, and root out ghost employees. Public money must be used to build infrastructure, provide frontline services, but should never be used to bankroll incompetence and indifference by many of these SOEs. The fifth reform of the sixth is one that is close to, I'm sure, everybody's feelings, and that is fixing local government. Coalition chaos, corruption, and collapsed service delivery cannot continue. And we're championing a new law to stabilize local councils. This bill will set minimum thresholds for political parties to get a seat in council. Government needs to ensure that they protect and reinvest revenue from services directly into infrastructure while welcoming private sector participation in struggling municipalities. It was very interesting for me this year, having attended the NAMPO conference for my 8th year, to gauge exactly the issues that are on the minds of particularly people who are active in the agriculture sector. And for the last 7 years, crime has been the top of the list. This year, it was infrastructure, the state of roads, the lack of electricity, which affects cold storage rooms and cold storage pack houses, roads that are so visibly potholed and damaged that you cannot move goods and services on them without significant damage to vehicles. Dairy companies that will no longer travel those roads to go and fetch the milk being produced, often in KwaZulu-Natal's case, by young black farmers, to be able to assist them. It was heartbreaking to be at an event recently where a group of young black female farmers have done a concession and are working together to pool their milk, only to have their dreams, the carpet of their dreams, pulled out from underneath them because the dairy company refuses to traverse the terrible roads to be able to go and collect the milk so that they can earn revenues from it. Where do they take their milk? What do? Another set of dreams from the very people who are standing up and saying, we want to play a role in the economy. We want to be entrepreneurs. We've been cut out before, but we are active in this economy. And yet the system continues to push them down even further. And finally, the sixth pillar is to restore the rule of law. It's now urgent that government creates a new anti-corruption commission, a Scorpions 2.0 to fight corruption. It is a shame, a national shame, that years on now, from a Zondo commission that cost South Africans almost R1 billion, that we're yet to see a single high-profile conviction of any of those architects, enablers, and actors in state capture. How can that be that national travesty has allowed to go on unpunished? How can it be that politicians whose names appear in that Zondo commission remain in key positions in government, in the civil service, and in some instances around the cabinet table? What does that say about accountability and transparency? What message does that send to all would-be perpetrators of corruption and new versions of state capture? That after a commission, you'll simply walk away scot-free. What does it say to the whistleblowers who had the courage to stand up and speak out, to sit in that commission day after day and give evidence against those perpetrators at great cost to themselves and in some instances at the greatest cost. And yet those people who were named, those people who were identified, those people against whom evidence was led, remain today scot-free. Not a single conviction, not a single major recovery, not a single victory. And it is because we do not have the infrastructure. The infrastructure that we had, the Scorpions, was dismantled. And it wasn't dismantled because it was failing. It wasn't dismantled because it wasn't fit for purpose. The Scorpions were disbanded precisely because that multidisciplinary model that brought forensics, accountants, lawyers, advocates, police officers, investigators, forensic investigators, together to build cases, started getting too close to the politicians. And the reality is that we will not get on top of the scourge of corruption unless those who are found guilty, those who are accused, feel the consequences of it. Police corruption needs to be rooted out through lifestyle audits for senior police officials. CEOs of entities and government departments should be subject to lifestyle audits. It should stick out as a sore thumb that someone who is a CEO of a particular entity is pitching up to work in a Maserati every day. It should stick out as a sore thumb when very obviously people in organizations like the IDT are buying huge mansions all over the country, way out of what their salary band would permit. We also need to tackle rural crime head on. And now that South Africa's rural safety is in the international spotlight, it behoves us to do something. And one of those things that you could do urgently is implement the DA's rural safety plan, which, working together with community policing, will bring rural policing close to the ground and to harness the power and goodwill that exists in all of our rural communities to be able to combat crime and the instability in those areas. We believe that these 6 interventions, just these 6 interventions, you don't need to have a talk shop about them, we don't need to have a national dialogue about them. These 6 things on their own would start the road towards building a superhighway towards growth in South Africa. And this will create an economy where your surname doesn't determine whether you succeed or not in your endeavors. It will be a country where every single South African can earn, can build, can thrive, and most importantly, can employ. And this is not a fantasy. This is what we're already doing in many of the places where we govern. In the national government to date, we've blocked a 2% VAT increase. We've reformed visa rules to attract tourism. We've opened new markets for agricultural exports. We've accelerated infrastructure investment. We've boosted safety in schools across South Africa. And we've grown jobs in the green economy. And we started the process of increasing broadband availability and providing internet access, easing stringent requirements that have been implemented by BEE in the ICT sector. And we're just getting started, but there's so much more that needs to be done. But this plan needs to become more than a promise. It needs to become a fight. And a fight that's picked up by every single South African. A fight for growth, a fight for jobs, and a fight for Kabelo and the thousands and millions like him all over the country. And that is why we don't need a national dialogue to determine what the things we need to do are. We have plans. We've got the medium-term development plan. And many of these initiatives will supplement what's already in the medium-term development plan. And that is why we'll be taking this document into any and all discussion on the economy within Cabinet. We'll be taking this document into every and all discussion on the economy in Cabinet subcommittees. And we'll be taking it to Parliament and to the legislatures and to the municipalities around the country. Because it is now time to implement. We have spoken for far too long about what is wrong. We now need to start doing what is right. And there can be no better time for South Africa as we stand at this crossroads to shrug off the shackles of the past and to unlock once and for always the true potential that exists inside South Africa, inside each and every South African, regardless of their skin color, and unlock that potential in the service of our nation. And so, if you are one of the millions of South Africans sitting at home, black South Africans, who are asking themselves the question, what has BE ever done for me? We've created 100 trillionaires. But what has it actually done for the Cabelos of the world? What has it done for you and your family? Why do too many of our citizens still languish in poverty, locked out of opportunity? And I ask you, do you want clean water in your taps? Do you want a government that spends money on you, not on politicians? Do you want electricity that you can rely on? Do you want your children to have an opportunity to have a job, and if they don't want to work for somebody, to have the freedom to take flight as young entrepreneurs with the nurturing and support from a government that's working with them? Then I say to you today that this is your plan. Take control of it. Take hands with us and join us in this fight, because the time for dialogue is over. It is now time for delivery. It is now time for action. And it is now time for the majority of South Africans to really start to taste the fruits of freedom in South Africa. A freedom that can only come through the dignity of a job and a growing economy, in communities where you feel safe, in communities where you have access to services, and in a country with a government that gets up every day working for you, not against you. That is our dream for each and every South African, wherever you may be, no matter how hopeless you may feel. There is a plan now that can build a ladder of opportunity for you and your family. We need you now to join us as we take this fight to the highest levels of government, to the municipalities, to the legislatures, and to those decision-making fora, and share this plan and get to work delivering it. The time for talk is over. It's now time for delivery. It is now time for action.
DA at Work, rescuing South Africa.